As a priest, it's kind of a fun gospel to read. We really get to test our chops with all these different names from these Old Testament figures. But the reason why the church gives us this particular gospel for this day that we celebrate the birth of Mary is to kind of illustrate the tribe, the people she was born from. And some of these people are really good, very outstanding, really righteous people. Some were wise. But also, if we read the Old Testament, we find that some were not so wise, were not so kind. They could be selfish, and at different times they followed false gods and kind of murderous people even. So it was to this group of people that Mary was born from. It's really a mixture of good and bad, but really a people in need of a Savior. And the reasons why we celebrate this feast day is one thing that's kind of unusual about this feast day is that the church only has 3 days a year that it celebrates a birthday. We have lots of saints' days, and most of those days occur on the day of their death, or their martyrdom, or just their passing from this life. But there's only 3 birthdays that are celebrated in the whole calendar, and it's obvious today is one of them, the birth of Mary, but also the birth of John the Baptist on June 24th, and of course, the birth of Christ at Christmas. And what makes the birth of Mary so important that it has its own special day is the fact that we believe that Mary was conceived without the stain of original sin. We'll celebrate that on December 8th, that she was, from the very moment of her conception, all of her life, she lived without that stain of original sin. And what makes it so important is ultimately is that leads to her able to say yes to the angel Gabriel when she was invited to be the mother of her Savior in a full and complete way. You know, one of the consequences of sin is it always does damage to our humanity. If you think about getting angry, sometimes when we have really that severe anger, almost feels like we get possessed by something. We have that sort of control over us. If that anger causes us to strike out with our words or in a physical way to somebody else, we can see how that does damage to that person that we are interacting with, if it causes pain or even worse, death. And of course, if that anger or whatever leads us to get caught and thrown into jail, we can see how all these things sort of do damage to our humanity. It sort of limits our freedom. A smaller example, but just as true, is like just telling a little white lie here or there. But eventually somebody asks another question, we have to say another white lie, and eventually we sort of box ourselves into a corner. Again, we lose some freedom. And that's why Mary was protected from the stain of original sin. Is that when the angel Gabriel came to her and says, "Do you want to be the mother of our Savior?" She could say that yes with a full, clean, loving, trusting human heart. Completely free. Completely from the goodness of her humanity, she could say yes. And because of that, Christ takes on our human flesh, our human nature, what it means to be a human person, what we call the incarnation, ultimately leading to Christmas Day. Again, we have this whole list of names that are presented to us, some good, some not so good, but all of them in need of a Savior. And from that protection that Mary had from original sin, from that true and complete and loving and trusting yes that she gave the angel Gabriel, Christ was born for us. Christ was given to us. Our salvation was given to us. And that is why we celebrate this great feast day of the birth of Mary. It truly is a turning point in the history of the world, and certainly for this list of names for this family, but for the whole world. Mary could say, yes, Christ was born for us, and our salvation began. So I invite all of us this day to spend some time in prayer, maybe asking for Mary's intercession for our own lives, especially when we feel trapped or stuck, sometimes by our own words and by our own actions, sometimes by our own sinfulness. Know that we have been provided with that way out. We've been provided with our Savior, born of Mary, given to us.